This is Bishop Michael Burbidge, and you are listening to the Walk Humbly Podcast.
Welcome to the Walk Humbly Podcast. I'm Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese and your co-host. If you haven't already, please make sure you rate this podcast and even write a review where you can on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, and we're also now on Spotify. We got a lot of requests for that, so we're now on Spotify. Sign up for our e-newsletter at arlingtondiocese.org. You can follow Bishop Burbidge on Twitter at Bishop Burbidge. You can also follow the diocese on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are always updating stuff. We've been doing a lot of Instagram stories, those kinds of things. So please check out Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can see what's going on. You also send questions for this podcast. Email us at info@arlingtondiocese.org. Again, send your questions to info@arlingtondiocese.org. I welcome your host, Bishop Burbidge. Bishop, how have you been?
I'm doing well, Billy. Thank you. Hope our listeners are having a good summer and enjoying these days with their families.
Yeah. Now, you've, speaking of summer, you've recently taken some trips and hung out with some friends and gotten some relaxation, I hope.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that. Where'd you go and what'd you do?
I kind of two traditions that I have with vacation time. Long-standing traditions, actually. 1 week I spend with some priest friends, and what we do, we all like music and history, so we just pick a U.S. city, and we go, and we don't go with any agenda, and let the days, just develop.
Yeah.
But this year we went to Memphis.
Memphis?
Yeah.
How'd you pick that one?
we figure we should find some place really hot, I guess. Yeah. No, but of course it's for the music, of course,
Yeah.
and Graceland and Elvis Presley there,
Yeah.
and, which actually maybe some of our listeners have been there. It's really well done. It's a museum.
Mm-hmm.
It takes you to his mansion, but it really goes through the music of that age and how it began in the studio where he and so many other famous artists. It looks like a corner store.
Wow.
Did their recordings and also learned a great deal. Visited, also traveled to where he was born, which is a really kind of story of poverty.
Yeah, he had a hard upbringing.
Yeah, very hard upbringing, and then eventually, became famous. But so we learned a little bit about that. It was fun. I mean,
Yeah.
you walk the streets of Memphis, and the music's playing, the barbecue's pretty good. Another powerful moment there, though, too, and this was one of the main reasons we went there, is the Civil Rights Museum is there.
Oh, right.
So very appropriate, especially in our day and age. And it's sombering in a way. It's very difficult because it brings to light what we've been discussing in our diocese and throughout the Conference of Bishops, the whole idea of prejudice and racism. And so the museum takes you back to the roots of that and how that has negatively impacted on our society and so many people. But also, in learning the history, hopefully you also learn the root causes and what we can be doing to improve that situation, to avoid it in all its forms. The museum itself, very interestingly, is the facade is actually the motel where Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and part of that.
Well, that has to be impactful when you
It's
see
very
it.
impactful
Because you only see it in photos, and to actually be there
right,
must be
and
really...
it ends up, looking out into that balcony. So
Yeah.
it's very. I have to say, it was very. It was so respectful.
Oh, good.
It was quiet. I mean, you're in a museum, but you're going towards that point, and the respect of the life that was lost in such a unacceptable, tragic way, and so it was good to see that. So it's a tradition. It's always good to be with priest friends. It's always good to learn a little bit more.
So when do you all pick the city for the next year? When does that happen?
Well, we should do it pretty soon.
Okay,
we started discussions and there was no consensus.
Yeah, okay.
And then the other tradition I have is with my family next in August. We rent a big house, and my nieces and nephews, my brother, and grandnieces and grandnephews will be there. So there'll be
little ones running around.
One house is about 5 children under, I think, 6 years of age. So I always say I come back after that for my vacation.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but I always do a shout out to our parents because, as a priest, you really get to see up close the joy, of course, and the blessing and the fun of the children. but it is work.
Well, I always say having children, it's more work than I can handle and more fun than I deserve. Sometimes you feel a little more of one than the other, but it's certainly there.
But even the littlest ones has figured out that I'm the one who says yes to everything. Oh, you want donuts? You want ice cream? Of course, whatever you want.
Well, I'm sure their parents love that. I'm sure that's just great.
But I do hope. In on a serious note, I hope our listeners really do have time this summer to refresh, renew, recreate, spend quality time with family and friends. I'm sure all of our listeners work very hard each and every day, and God gives us time. The Lord Himself took time away.
Right.
For what reason? To be renewed and to be refreshed, to be stronger, so you can come back stronger in your commitment to live out the vocation that you are. So it's it should be viewed as God's gift to us, and hopefully a time of blessing and enjoyment.
I remember a priest one time describing to me the liturgical season as explaining that we naturally need kind of a rhythm and a change of pace. We can't be relaxed all the time or drive in overdrive all the time.
Right.
And that even the liturgical season, some are very somber and very almost like sad, reflecting on our own sinfulness and the sacrifice of Christ. But then you've got Advent, which is much more joyful, anticipating the newborn King and all those kinds of things, that it's very natural. And vacations are kind of a part of that, even just short getaways. If you can do anything to just, break up your mindset a little bit. It's very refreshing.
Sure. And we just celebrated St. Benedict yesterday. Yeah. And he always talked about that, that healthy balance in life. Prayer and work and recreation, not just a monastery, but for all of us in whatever vocation God has given to us. I always give a shout out in July on his feast day. I always think the Rule of St. Benedict is a very short volume, but it's timeless advice and suggestions is a good book to read.
Very good. Now, just a few weeks ago, you ordained 4 new men to the priesthood, and we talked about that on one of our podcasts. As time goes on, I'm sure the realities, both the joys and the challenges, kind of like we mentioned with parenthood, but there's joys and there's challenges in the priesthood. They become very real. It's not academic anymore. They're actually living the life of a priest. What do you do to kind of encourage them, maybe check in on these young men as they're kind of finish their formation and living the life of a priest? Yeah,
well, first thing I do is I call their pastors, make sure we're getting work out.
You invested a lot. You need a lot. Yeah.
No, I'm not kidding. The priests that in this diocese, including the ones we just ordained, are just on fire. They're filled with zeal.
Yeah.
It's so great to see. But it is very important, and the church and her documents will speak directly to bishops, that it's very important for the bishop to have a pastoral care of his priests, especially those in their first 5 years of ordination.
Oh, okay.
And so one of the things that I do with our men, and our newly ordained will now be part of this group, who are ordained, 1 to 5 years, is I will meet with them, just me and the priest, quarterly, and we'll discuss a certain topic or a certain book or whatever may be worthy of our discussion, or maybe even a topic they suggested. And part of that time is dedicated also to let me know how you're doing. Yeah. And it's great. The exchange is wonderful. And of course, we pray together and have a meal together. So that's one routine. But also, we have different, especially for our newly ordained, different workshops, in our clergy office, and I always have a chance to stop by. So it's very, very important that the bishop takes seriously that responsibility.
And I know you've had experience with seminaries, both, assisting in administration at one and those kinds of things. You've probably seen a lot of the challenges and when they maybe come up for priests. And I know just in the married life that there are certain windows of time when you see divorce rates kind of spike, like a certain amount of years that a couple has been married, and then you see that there are particular times when it happens to occur that unfortunately often the marriage ends. So in the priest life, is there certain windows where it's a little more challenging, it seems, than others, or is it kind of different for each person?
Yeah, I haven't really taken notice of that.
Yeah.
I mean, there certainly are times where the demands or pressures may increase.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
But if the priest is approaching that as his great privilege and not a burden, and keeping that discipline of these sort of things, whether I'm busy or not busy, that must be a daily part of my life.
Yeah.
A holy hour, his prayer, the liturgy of the hours, the time he spends alone with the Lord, the rosary. Like, if he's doing all those things, then hopefully, no matter how busy we get, it doesn't take us away from the joy of living this beautiful ministry. It's true for married couples.
I was
it's
just going to say,
anyone, right?
Sounds familiar. Every advice I've been given by priests about marriage.
Stick
life,
to the
marriage
basics.
life.
Don't lose the basics. Keep them focused, and every once in a while, a little reflection on how am I doing. Staying vigilant is always helpful.
Yeah. Now, you've recently visited a retreat, Quo Vadis. It's a retreat for young men and helping in their discernment of vocation things. Talk a little bit about what you saw there, what you experienced.
It's incredible. This is the first time I saw a camp like this was when I came to the Diocese of Arlington, which is a long-standing tradition. And Quo Vadis is come and see for young men who are spending a camp, with other men their age, high school age. And there's a real focus on vocations, not just priesthood,
right,
but certainly priesthood, but trying to help men. What is discernment? How do you know where God is leading you and where God is calling you? So the day, of course, consists of prayer and daily mass and confessions and holy hours, all those things, plus all the fun activities of that young men enjoy, maybe playing soccer and there's speakers. But all of any of our seminarians on summer assignment are there with them.
Yeah.
So they get to know our seminarians, and our seminarians are so great with them. And I go the first day, and the families drop them off, and we have mass for all the families, and the young men are ready to go. We always have a waiting list. So it's a
great problem to have.
It is. And many of our seminarians, are products of Quo Vadis.
That's great.
That's where they really did hear
it's working.
where God's calling them. And then, next week will be what we call Fiat, Mary's Yes for young women. And it's kind of this same theme and the same routine, but more with an emphasis with the young women, religious from various communities and all will be there. But it's a camp. It's fun too.
It's fun.
It's young people, so lots of energy.
I got to speak at it last year. You typically have either someone or a couple come and talk about the married life.
Right.
And
yeah.
So I went, and they're playing soccer and everything. I said, "So what's the schedule next?" I was talking to our vocations director, and he said, "Well, next is your talk." And I'm thinking, "Oh boy, all these sweaty kids packed into a." They said, "Oh no, everyone showers up first."
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So we went in, and they said, "Are you willing to take questions afterward?" I said, "Absolutely." I'm thinking, with the age of the guys, I think this will be easy. Those questions were as deep as anything I've ever heard. It was really great questions about, how do you know when you're in love versus just, have affection for somebody? I'm like, whoa, these are deep questions. It was very refreshing to see how thoughtful these young men were about thinking through their vocation. These were not superficial questions about, what's the day in a life like? Well, that's not the heart of the vocation. Boy, that was
they're
refreshing.
Serious discerners.
It was really impressive.
They're serious discerners, and again, as you mentioned, we talk about all the vocations to which God may be calling them. So it's a great experience. It's at Mount St. Mary's University,
right?
So we're very grateful to the university for opening their campus to us.
It's a great campus for it too, as well. This coming week, you've got a couple of interesting pastoral visits. I was looking at your calendar, and I wanted to ask you, you're going to be visiting Inova Hospital, where Father Stefan's the chaplain, and you're also going to the Arlington Detention Center. I see elements of the gospel peeking out of these pastoral visits, but when you visit those kinds of situations, people who are in prison or people in a hospital, what is your message? What do you talk to them about?
And so you mentioned Father Stefan, he's there at the hospital 7 days a week, and I always hear such wonderful compliments about him and his ministry.
Boundless energy,
Boundless energy, and so as you're the presence of the church to people usually in an hour and time of need, where they're coming face to face with the vulnerability, with the fact that life is not here on earth is not guaranteed. Tomorrow is not guaranteed, and when you're ill, or especially if you're dealing with a serious condition, you come face to face with that reality. And so, as a priest or bishop visiting, you represent the church, but most importantly, you represent the Lord. That in the midst of your suffering, Christ is present. Christ is present. Unite your cross to His. And you will find the grace and the strength that you need. Whatever cross the Lord has given to you, He'll help you to carry it, and it will lead to your sanctification. and to give that reassurance, and all you do is invite, and sometimes you find patients maybe who are not at that point ready for such a conversation, and that's okay. You just say, we just want you're here. Let me just assure you of my prayers or something.
Planting a seed.
And sometimes it's a real moment of conversion, just the opposite. I've been away from the church, Father. Thank you for visiting me. Can I go to confession or whatever?
That's
so every time you walk in that door, you don't know what to expect, but you just go inviting the love and of Christ and the prayers of healing and blessings and all too. When you visit the inmates, the prison ministry, I often leave there very inspired that somehow, some way, the men who are coming to pray, the men who are coming to Mass, have not lost hope. They've grown closer to the Lord in their relationship, and they want to talk about. The homily is usually a dialogue because they want to be engaged. So I'll usually, when I preach there, I'll just say, here's what I heard the Word of God saying. What did you hear? And wow, some of the responses, and because then they're able to apply it to their situation. Yeah. And then, of course, you always want to reassure. Obviously, they've made some mistake. Yeah, right. That's why they're there. Maybe a very serious one. But you want to reassure the truth of the gospel, that no sin, no failure are ever greater than God's mercy. And that God truly, with the expression of sorrow, the desire to convert, truly God accepts that. And his love is even greater. And so you want to give that reassurance too. But often you leave a hospital, often you leave I'm sure my brother priest would say this, a prison visit or whatever. Usually you end up being the one more inspired by the example, by the witness that you encounter.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. We are entering into political season. To say entering into is maybe correct. I think we're well within it, and we've had one of the Democratic primary debates. Town halls are happening. A lot of political chatter on social media. Talk to us about what's kind of going through your head. What are you seeing and noticing in this political environment?
Yeah, first, it's hard to believe.
It seems like we never leave.
I know. It seems like we never leave. Unfortunately, I think we continue to see something that's plaguing our society right now. Yeah. And this is on both sides of the aisle. That a lack of civility, I would say, a real discourse, a willingness to listen to one another, even those that we disagree with. And you see it being played out in the public arena, in the news reports, in the talk shows, or whatever. And so you just always hope. I think we always mention Pope Francis as a great example of what true discourse, what true dialogue, what true tolerance really means, without compromising who you are, without compromising what you believe or the convictions that you hold dear. But anyway, it gets us back to what we talk about a lot on the podcast of, we're not only called to be citizens, we're called to be faithful citizens. Right. And so it's very important for us as we, begin elections and prepare for them, that we do our part. I always say we do our homework. What are the issues? Who are the candidates? What are they saying? That when I cast my vote, it is with a well-informed vote. Yeah. And for us as Catholics, as faithful citizens, the priorities, the highest priority must be for us the protection of the sacredness of all human life and the dignity of all human persons. And so that's always what we can never compromise that. We must always bring that to the table.
And we've seen that play out in our state so vividly, in a lot of the stories and the bills that have been proposed, and it's been certainly an active battle here. For those listening, if you would like to go down that road that Bishop was just talking about, inform your conscience a little more of the issues and the candidates, those kinds of things, I would recommend going to vacatholic.com. That's for the Virginia Catholic Conference. They've got great resources kind of on the state level. But for the faithful citizenship resources, the USCCB has put a lot of effort into developing these resources for you. These were written for you to help you develop your conscience and understand the issues through the lens of the church. Just go to usccb.org and you can access all of those documents there.
And Billy, I would also like to say to our listeners that maybe we can be mindful of our own example, whether it be with our families or our colleagues or work. If we do engage in the topics of the day or the political issues, that we give that example of being strong and steadfast in our faith, but also in a way that's respectful of others.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple questions from the faithful bishop. Fran from St. John the Evangelist asks, how are decisions made to send seminarians to which seminaries? So we've got a few different seminaries you send guys to.
Right.
How do you pick for a certain guy?
Yes. So the majority of our, and this has been a strong tradition in the Diocese of Arlington for a while. So the majority of our seminarians go either to St. Charles Borromeo Seminary in Philadelphia or Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg. So that's always been a tradition in Arlington. So I'm certainly maintaining that. Both are excellent seminaries, two of the best in the nation. Very similar in their program. So we try to keep a balance, and there's no magic formula. We just, the guy's personality, or there may be certain family issues where someone, it'd be better if he was closer to home at Mount St. Mary's than St. Charles, or someone who's never left home might be better for him to go further away, So you put a lot of different factors together, but they're both very, very similar programs. For our men who have not yet, and this is the smaller number of guys who come into seminary, but for the men who have not yet received their college degree, the Archdiocese of Washington has a wonderful program, St. John Paul II Seminary, which is like a formation where the men where they live in community and do their prayers and their formation, but they attend the university, the Catholic University of America. Oh, okay. So it kind of gives them that big balance. Yeah. So if we have someone not yet who's completed his college degree, it's automatically would be St. John Paul II.
And I would imagine they're in kind of a different phase of formation.
Right.
That's helpful to get that.
And it's very specialized. And then we do send some seminarians to Rome. Who would have the abilities with language to be able to study, who have had the life experience where studying overseas would be a good experience for them, and a desire to. I don't just appoint someone to Rome, because that's a whole different experience. Yeah. It's more of an invitation to some men who may accept that.
Okay. Very good. All right, Chris from St. Rita's in Alexandria says, now that Amazon will establish half their headquarters in Arlington with a promise of 25,000 high-paying white-collar jobs, what are we going to do as a Catholic community to help the low-income people who live nearby, who will likely be forced out of their homes as the cost of living in the area rises? This has been a news topic as well as a question from Chris here at St. Rita's.
Yeah, and Chris, it's a very good question, and it's one that we certainly have been discussing since this news broke about Amazon. And so you can be assured that our Catholic Charities office is very much on top of this to see to begin to answer that question. We don't know the specific realities of what that impact will be, but we know it is going to hit. Yeah. So what we can do to provide that housing is an ongoing dialogue and discussion. We're very early in that right now, but it's certainly a priority. As will be, the evangelization efforts. That's a lot of new jobs, maybe a lot of younger people moving in with Amazon, and so how are we going to reach out to those coming into the diocese, to make sure that they know we're here in the Catholic Diocese of Arlington, and how we can invite them to be part of our community, and also to use the gifts and talents that may surround us. Right. Going back to the housing question, I think that's going to have to be a partnership. Yeah. With other faith denominations, also maybe with Amazon itself.
Yeah, because they've talked about acknowledging that this is going to change the landscape here.
So we're going to stay vigilant with that.
Very good. Bishop, any if you could offer any final thoughts, or and then if you would send us off with your blessing.
Yeah, sure. And just thank you, everyone, for listening. And certainly, as we said earlier in the podcast, hope your summer is going well. I do hope you have some time for rest and renewal, and that you have some quality family time if you can also. That would be a great thing. But know that my prayers are with you. Please continue to pray for me and our diocese so that together we may walk humbly with our God. Thank you for listening to the Walk Humbly Podcast. Make sure you check out more episodes on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can follow me on Twitter @Bishop Burbidge, where I offer spiritual reflections each morning in the gospel and share photos and updates of what is going on in the Diocese of Arlington. Stay up to date with news, event information, inspirational content, and more by subscribing to our e-newsletter at arlingtondiocese.org.